an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Fullmetal Alchemist, Brotherhood. Season 1, Episode 22, Backs in the Distance. In this episode, Winry finds out who Scar is. And she winds up with a weapon in her hands and a choice to make. And it feels almost like she doesn't think she had a choice, which is interesting. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Max for commissioning this episode. What's up, Max? So this episode was really surprising. There were a number of big surprises here. The first one that I need to address is Führer Bradley. I have got to just once more reiterate how absolutely fucking hysterical it is to me that his name is Bradley and that I meant to call him Führer Bradley, because truly it just doesn't go. If I even went to say Führer Wrath, that would feel better. I feel like maybe I will just call him Wrath, but then it gets kind of confusing because I only really want to call him that when the people in the scene with him know that's who he is. He's otherwise the Führer when he is with people who are unaware. You know what I mean? So but it just feels, so many of the names in this, I'm just like, why? I suppose that's true. Michael says you can call him King. Feels like you're being kinky, Michael. But you're not wrong. So, all right, I'll call him the King because that just feels a little bit easier somehow. But the whole thing in the last episode, which ended with him going after, is her name Fan Ma? I'm trying to remember. But it's Ling's compatriot and bodyguard. It's so open and in broad daylight, and I was really surprised that he'd just give himself away in this fashion. I don't know if he's Lan Fan. Thank you, guys. There is no reframing what is happening here, you know? Kyle says, no, he's not a king. King just happens to be his first name. Uh-oh, somebody's at the door. They're just going to have to sit there. I had no idea that his name is King. I am sorry. I just said how ridiculous some of the names are, but that one is really over the top. That is absurd. Oh my God. His first name is King. Look, I get it. He's been put here for a purpose. He is Wrath. Fine. But I draw the line at his first name just being King. Oh my God. Guys, I'm sorry. I'm going to take a minute. I just have to adjust to this real quick because I truly did not get that at all. I had no idea. I was not putting that together. I can't. What? Okay. All right. Let me back up here. King is, see, Michael's getting it. He says, why couldn't his name be Bradley King? Truly. And don't get me wrong, calling him King Führer or Führer King would also be weird, but it wouldn't feel quite so ridiculous. It would just kind of feel like that's a little redundant, you know? But his first name being King, that is a whole other thing. All right, whatever. Okay. What I was saying was, there does not, as far as I can tell, seem to be a way that he can play this if anybody saw this fight. And that is the part that I'm a little bit confused by, is that he is so willing to be out there in these streets, absolutely no mistake, going after Ling's bodyguard in favor of defending Gluttony. And I don't understand how he feels so at ease with doing this and why he is so confident it's not going to like blow back on him or come to anybody else's attention. Like, truly for me, I would think that he would be paranoid, you know, about not wanting to let anybody see what he really is. And it's not like he just can fight them and just say some bullshit about how like, oh, well, they were going to commit treason or they were in league with Scar. He takes his fucking like eye patch off and is out in the open doing his thing as Wrath. And maybe it's supposed to be that this whole area has been like evacuated, but there's been no mention of that. I don't know. Maybe it's part of his wrath-like nature sort of coming out, and that he is doing things that aren't super logical because he's losing control of his temper. Or maybe there's like a plan in place and we're reaching the end stage of a plan where it's not going to be super necessary for him to conceal what he is anymore. I don't know, but it just felt like really wild to me that he was this, you know what I mean? Kyle says, to be fair, if you tried to tell people you saw Joe Biden in the street sword fighting people, how many people could you get to believe you? And Michael says about 70 million. And honestly, Michael took the words right out of my mouth. Kyle, you know everybody that would believe you. You know exactly who they are. You could pinpoint them who would believe you. I mean, come on. The thing is, it's just like the whole thing with this world is that eyewitnesses seem to be believed, you know, because we don't have, so if there's enough people and this is like a city, they're fighting on the tops of multi-level buildings. So there's plenty of like opportunity for several people to watch this and spot this at once. So yeah, I don't know. B. Moore says he's not defending Gluttony. Clearly, he's just enforcing the law by hunting down a clearly armed and dangerous illegal alien. Ice Amestris edition. B. Moore, he might be able to frame it that way. The thing is how many people saw this and saw in detail? How many people saw him take his eye patch off? And even if they did, they are probably not going to be able to see that tattoo. I'm guessing they probably won't be able to like make out exactly what happened there, but there is a point at which Gluttony says, can I eat her? And he says, make it quick. That's the part, like, you could maybe get away with banking on the fact that people either could not see or would be unable to identify the tattoo. But when you tell Gluttony that he is free to eat this girl, that really puts it in like, they're in cahoots kind of vibes, you know? And for his part, Ling went up quite a bit in my estimation. I had no time for him. As somebody who grew up without a lot of money and always was like a little bit ashamed of the fact that I couldn't pay for myself or couldn't afford certain things, not so much in that like I felt ashamed of being poor, but I couldn't participate in certain things and it bummed me out, or people would have to pay for me and I would feel kind of bad about that. Ling's like choice to completely sponge off of Ed when he's a fucking prince frustrates me. And I feel like there has to be some kind of explanation as to why he doesn't have any fucking money. Like, he has to, there is something else going on with him. It is not what he is saying, or at least it's not as simple as what he is saying. And once I find out what that is, I may forgive him. But I have been mooched off of and was always so hyper conscious of being perceived as a mooch that an allegedly rich dude mooching off of somebody who, I won't say that Ed is poor because like clearly they pay pretty fucking well, but is a regular person. I was just like, I don't have any fucking time for this guy. And then he comes out with this, like, first of all, Führer, I know who you are, and you're supposed to protect your people. And if you're not doing that, then you're fucking nothing. What are you? You're worthless. And he's like dead ass sincere. This is being put to the test as we speak, and he is like meeting it and facing it. And I was just like, oh, okay, he means it. And then he can fight. Like, Bradley is just going with his fucking sword. And this kid is just dodging and weaving, and he has Lanfan over his shoulder the entire time of, like, he is dodging and ducking. That is hard enough if it's just you. But never mind carrying a whole other person over your shoulders. And even King Bradley, I cannot, you guys, I swear to God. Oh my God. Okay. Even he is a little impressed. He winds up calling in Gluttony to, like, kind of, sucker punch is the wrong word, but like tackle him, a surprise tackle. And it is the only thing that would have worked, because it really seemed like Ling had this shit on lock and was not about to be taken by surprise here. And they wind up, like, in this building because Gluttony smashes him into another building. And this building that he gets smashed into, I will acknowledge, is abandoned. So maybe that is like part of the thing, is that I'm supposed to interpret that this whole area of town is sort of abandoned. I don't know. It just felt like kind of a easy solution. But I kept thinking about, you know, in every like Marvel movie, any superhero movie pretty much, there's like a moment where some crazy shit happens outside of an office building. There's a big, you know, skyscraper glass thing, and they like crash into it, or somebody falls past the windows, or somebody's stuck to the windows, or what I like. And all I could think was like what they would feel if this fight began to happen in the midst of their, like, you know, cubicle farm area. And Alex says, I went back and checked. I'm pretty sure Bradley only took off his eye patch after they get into the abandoned building. You're right, because it's after they oh, I'm sorry, guys. I moved my desk here. I'm going to make my ring light fall over again. I think it's the flashbang that he chucks, and that's what winds up like causing him to pull it off so that he can still see. So you're right. You're right. Thank you, Alex. That's fair. But I don't know. It's I still like, I don't know. It still felt dangerous to me. It felt like a questionable thing to do in the middle of the street with Gluttony and telling him, yeah, you can eat her, just make it quick. But anyway, yeah, he says to Ling, he says, who are you? And how did you find out what's inside Gluttony? And I'm assuming he's talking about the Philosopher's Stone, which is maybe an answer to the question that I had in the last episode, because I was like, how did they sense these guys? And maybe he isn't sensing Gluttony. He's sensing the Philosopher's Stone. I don't know how he would do that either, to be fair. But this is when Bradley's like, you should put that girl down because she's dead weight. And that is when Ling is like, oh, dead weight? What the fuck is wrong with you? And he thinks that he can use this to distract Bradley and get out. But there is like a whing sound. And Bradley has thrown his sword into the door jamb to block his way just as he is reaching the door. And it's like obvious that he overestimated the efficacy of what he was doing here. Not only that, but Bradley's response to him is that you should know there are no true kings, which was an interesting reply. And made me really curious too, because I haven't really stepped back and asked myself what the point is of Bradley being in the position that he's in when this like genocide apparently was instigated by him, which feels like Bradley is he was positioned so as to create some of the worst like discord and bloodshed that this country has seen, if not ever, in quite some time. You know, I don't even want to say that it's because whomever he's working for or with has something against Ishval specifically, because I am going to guess Ishval was like step one, and they're probably going to try and go after some other country afterward. I don't know if that would be Xing or what, but I hadn't really considered the larger scope of what could be going on in relation to the genocide itself being like part of a plan. Because usually genocide is its own reward, right? Like people are just, I hate these people. I want their land. I want their power. I think they're evil, or I'm pretending to think they're evil. And I'm going to take their shit and kill them all. And that's that's it. That's why you do it, to accomplish those goals. And it's very simple and sort of straightforward in its weird way. And it's also like uniting the people against a common enemy, you know. But if there is more happening here, which there clearly is, it cannot be that simple. So either Ishval is one of a few countries that they are going to be going after, or the attack on Ishval was meant to instigate something, perhaps like create enemies or start a cycle of violence, like, and get it going, because whomever is behind all of this is aware that we don't need that much prodding to begin to get into that like vengeance and retribution sort of cycle. And maybe they just need people to be at each other's throats and unhappy for some reason. I don't know why that would be. Or maybe there was something located in Ishval and they needed to get it, but committing the genocide they did in order to get it feels a little wild. Like, I don't know what could be positioned in such a way that wiping out entire towns would have to be necessary to accomplish it. And maybe it's like, for all I know, they could draw entire giant circles outside of a town and then consider everybody that they killed within the town like a sacrifice of some kind to make a super powered fucking philosopher. You know what I mean? Like, there's any number of things that could be going on here, but my point is that I just hadn't really stopped to consider what the bigger picture was in that regard. And now I don't know what to think, because previously I had been sort of feeling like Wrath was operating by himself. And there have been a couple moments, I feel like, where it's sort of implied that his siblings, for lack of a better word, have not seen him very much. So it does sort of seem like he's been on his own. But I could be like sort of reading that wrong. But if that's so, then they're not involved necessarily in the main thing. Like, it feels as if each of them is being told as much as they need to know, and no more than that. Why? What is it that they're all working toward? Do they even know? Or are they just doing what they're being told to do because they're very loyal or have been created by this person? Damien says, I suspect that the Xingxi's people are like somebody going from a cold climate going to somewhere warm. The Amestrians are used to the warm air, but the Xingxi's aren't, so they're more susceptible / perceptive toward whatever the homunculi give off. I don't really understand how that would work. Like, so Damien, is what you're saying they're more like sensitive to it because they're not around it all the time? Is that what you mean? Like, the people who are actually Amestrian they have like these homunculi in and amongst them so often, that they don't even really notice it anymore. Okay, that's interesting. Huh. I don't know. Like, if it were that simple, I don't know if he would even ask, but maybe he just doesn't really know that's how it works either. I don't know. That's interesting, though. So this, like, I really didn't know what to think, because we cut from him saying, essentially, that shit isn't going to work on me, kiddo, to the moment when Winry and her parents are separated from one another and her parents go off to war. And it's a really, like, weird sort of black and white moment, you know, really meant to convey this loss. And then we go to Winry, so we don't see what happened to Ling here. And the sort of presiding issue with Winry at this point, she's going to visit Hughes's grave with his wife and daughter. And she's remembering seeing her parents go, like, walking away from her. She is remembering Hughes and, you know, how kind he was and how generous, and all of this stuff is like bits and pieces of the overall grief that she has lived with her whole life. And it makes a lot of sense why in the present she is so protective of Ed and Al, because I think that it's important to have it framed this way personally. You could just have Winry be somebody who's like protective just because, you know, and it would be very, very much implied, like, oh, it's because she's a girl, you know, that she's so worried about them and she's more concerned about danger and stuff because she's a girl and she's just not used to this and she's not used to their job. But instead, it's more, she has experience with losing people, and there haven't been that many people in her life to begin with. So losing them is extra hard. And, you know, that if you're somebody who comes from a relatively small family, I technically come from a very large family, but my actual family that I saw at holidays and hung out with all the time on weekends was really small. It was me and my mom and my dad and my grandma. And one year, my dad and my grandma both died within like a month of each other. And it was like half my family was gone, more than half. You know, it really just felt like everything completely shifted in a way that it could never unshift from again. And so I know that vibe of just, I don't have that many people that I care about or consider family or trust to start off with. I cannot afford to lose another one. And that's not to say that people who have big families don't feel their grief as intensely or that it's like not as important to them. But I think that when you've got a big family and you lose someone, you have the rest of your family to lean on in a lot of ways. And it can feel like you're grieving alongside others to whom this person really mattered. And if that isn't how your life is set up, it can feel really isolating. You know, like when my dad and grandmother died, I was still living really far away from my mother. So I was grieving by myself. Like, I had Brendan, but he didn't even really know them very well. We were living in Philadelphia, you know, it was just, so her feeling really protective and having the sorts of reactions she's having when she finds out that they're fighting and stuff, that feels extremely justified to me. And I think it's a nice touch to everything. So this moment too, when she goes to visit Hughes's grave and his daughter holds her hand and she looks down and she clearly has this moment of like seeing herself in this little girl and remembering what this was like. She walks away and she's like later on in town and she overhears somebody saying that the Elric brothers are out there wreaking havoc and that they're with the guy that killed off state alchemists. And somebody's like, are you serious? They haven't dealt with him yet? And this is when we get the moment of her remembering watching her parents walking away and watching Edward walk away. And this was sort of because, like, you guys know that there have been a couple titles of these episodes that I'm like, I don't really get why this is the title for this one. And that's the deal with this. Backs in the distance. It's people walking away, and that's the last memory that you have of them. You know, not knowing that they're not going to make it back necessarily. But when you think back to the last time you saw them, it's going to be of them walking away from you. And this is so she's saying, not again, please, as she's like heading towards the source of all of the explosions in town. This was something that I found kind of questionable personally, just like, I feel the state does not have great security if they are just allowing her to walk on into this fucking war zone. But maybe, like I said, you know, we don't know that necessarily anybody was ever evacuated or anything. And she manages to just stumble upon it, essentially. And we then cut to the fight itself. And honestly, guys, there is this amazing moment where Edward is climbing up a pipe and Scar cuts the pipe so that he begins to like fall backward. And Edward is just screaming, like out of control, complete panic screaming. And I don't know why, but seeing Edward truly lose his shit for a minute because he's like losing the fight, that shit is so funny to me. I think he manages to keep up such a tough face so much of the time that when he finally cracks and is like, I am fucking losing, oh my God, it's just, there's something really amusing about that. And you know it's like starting to get bad when he really shows his hand like that. And at this point, Al pops up and he just uses his alchemy to like create a hand out of the ground to catch Ed in. And Ed looks over, nice one, brother, appreciate it. Meanwhile, Al is like, we need to get the fuck out of here. I mean, this is clearly out of control. We are losing. There is no sign of our homunculi, and Ling was supposed to set off a flare of some kind, and he doesn't do it. Because he's being attacked by King Bradley. Meanwhile, there's some guys on the sidelines that are like asking if they can take a shot, and they're being told no. And these dudes are genuinely like, I don't fucking get it. So then we wind up with Al and Ed flanking Scar, and Al realizing they need to buy some time. So Al kind of tries to engage Scar in conversation here. And this is such a weird scene because Scar is kind of like receptive to it. It's just like, well, you know, and he mentions about like alchemy being seen by Scar as some sort of like perversion of the natural order or a sin. And he's like, but you're using it as well. And he says, I explained it when we met in East City. Where there are creators, there must be a destroyer. And Al says that's a lie. Which is a really like a much, for me, a lie is like, you're trying to convince me, but this is so much more than a lie because he's like trying to convince himself, really, you know? He says, you're using the name of your God to justify murder. Revenge is all you care about. When you killed Shao Tucker and Nina, I suppose you believe you were doing God's work then too. And Scar, at this point, fucking, he drops some bars on them and is like, wait, those two? Guys, come on. If you saw them, you had to know there was no way they were coming back from that. Like, she wasn't going to be unmade and turned back into a little girl. What they would do is put her in a fucking lab and poke and prod her and do experiments on her for the rest of her life. And you know that. So don't fucking come around here acting like I did something monstrous when what I did was merciful and probably what you should have done. The fact that you knew about it and she was just sitting there fucking alive, truly, that's on you. And what's interesting is that Ed immediately is like, all right, but that's true though. I didn't expect that. I thought that Ed would sort of push back against that like assessment. And instead, immediately, it's just guilt. And him being like, we really did know there was nothing to be done. And because we thought there was nothing to be done, we didn't do anything. And that's like, you know, those are different things. This, you know, I just appreciated this being addressed because y'all know that one of the first things I said when it came to that scene was how relieved I was that she was she was actually dead by the end of the episode. Because I thought we were going to get this drawn out thing with her like existing somewhere and being this constant reminder of this atrocity. And instead it's this sudden death that like felt really like a relief to me, but I didn't think that we were going to double back and really address it at all. And I wouldn't have been mad if we didn't come back and address it at all. Because there are people who, while they know it probably would be better for this person to be dead, they just can't like reconcile that with the, you don't kill people, you know, they understand logically if they were put out of their misery, that would be for the best, but they can't be the one to do it. And I'm not throwing shade on that. That's not me trying to be like, they know it's for the best, but they don't have the fucking balls. I just like, not everybody is built that way. I don't know if I would be built that way. I like to think I would be. And I can be a little cold-blooded at times. So I might. But I really don't know. I just, you know, and Al, it's like an interesting moment that sort of mirrors what happens later with Winry, where he is wondering, like, he says, we knew full well what would happen to her. And Ed says, we didn't even want to think about it. There was no hope. And then Al says, so we did nothing. And Ed thinks nothing. And I love that. It's like both of them having this like moment and it's sort of, you know, jumping back and forth between the two of them. And Ed later on is talking to Winry and is just like, you know, he says that thing about her hands are meant for life. And I don't really think it's exactly that sort of case, but I think a mercy killing is a different beast. It's not killing in the heat of the moment. It's not killing to defend somebody. It's not killing because you're trying to defend yourself. It's just a really brutal act that can feel like it's taking your humanity away from you, even while you're trying to grant humanity to someone else by keeping them from having to suffer in a way that feels monstrous, you know? So I'm not mad at them. You know, I appreciate that they have the self-awareness to acknowledge that, because not everybody would. Some people would just, the guilt would prod them into being more defensive about it. And they don't like, it's not like they say it out loud to Scar, like, oh, actually, you're right. But in their heart of hearts, they fucking know it. And this is when Winry, she's coming up one of the alleys. And this is when Ed says, some alchemists have made serious mistakes, but despite what you think, that doesn't make what you're doing right. And we can't let you continue. You're so self-righteous, but do you remember 2 Amestrian doctors named Rockbell? The order came down to end the uprising and exterminate Ishval, but that didn't stop them. They kept right on helping your people. And I love this because Al spots Winry and is like, oh no. And he tries to step in before Ed blurts out what actually happened. But he's too late. Those doctors saved your life and you killed them. And this was a really interesting little twist here because the way that it's like talked about earlier makes it really sound like they healed Scar and he was in his little sick bed and slowly recovering, and they cut the cast off of his broken leg, and then he kicked them in the chest and stabbed them in the throat and they died, and he was like, haha, fuck you. And that is super duper not what's in the memory that we get to see. The memory is rough. So we go back into this like moment with his brother, and he is going and kind of like getting on his brother's case for taking time to look at his notes instead of like evacuating with everybody and getting ready to fight. And his brother, this is obviously him figuring out how to do the whole thing with alchemy using the tattoos on his arms and getting in touch with things. He says, I studied the alchemy they use in the East and then added my own touches. I discovered something else in my research. The alchemy of this land is quite unusual. And he gets cut off here. So that is the beginning of this, is his brother was researching all of it and just sort of experimenting. And the guys outside are telling Scar the enemy has state alchemists. They're using their weapons, their magic as weapons. And what your brother's doing might be the only way that we can get back at them. And Scar is like, wait, but what does that have to do with my brother's research? And they say he's the only one who can stand against them. If he can match their powers with his, he could find a way to annihilate the military and the threat to us would be ended. Kill them before they can kill us and take them down with alchemy, beating them at their own game. And what happens here is sort of weird. Because instead of Scar being like, oh, okay, that makes sense, which is what I expected, he goes back to his brother and starts yelling at him for investigating alchemy at all. He's like, this is what you're aligning with. You're creating evil. And I didn't expect that because I know the Scar that we have here today. We have the bloodthirsty, pay them back in blood Scar. And it wasn't clear to me. I don't feel like it was made that clear. I think what I'm doing here is like coming to the understanding now. But this Scar is, I don't want to say like peace loving necessarily, but he's somebody who wants a different option than to just engage in the same kind of butchery, I suppose. And I think he believes that's what his brother is starting down the road toward. And so my, what I was expecting in the scene where they're telling Scar, hey, your brother is figuring out how to use alchemy. I thought he'd be like, no shit. Oh, that's what he's doing. Also, I was a little surprised that that came as a surprise since his brother kind of tells him that's what he's researching, and he's acting like he doesn't understand. But instead, he's mad at his brother about it, and I just genuinely was taken aback by that. I thought that he would be all over it. So then we get this interesting moment of all of these soldiers marching into Ishval, into their particular town. There's alchemy being used to create these huge walls so that the people can't escape, and the soldiers are just coming in and shooting them all as they're helpless up against a wall. It's truly awful. This is the kind of thing that is, it's just a slaughter of animals. They're penned in with their backs to a wall, just being taken out completely at random. There is no, I'm targeting a particular enemy. They're going after everybody that they can find. And as they come in the town, there's a focus on their eyes. Their eyes are all this really bright blue, which I thought was interesting because I don't think I had realized that everybody had blue eyes from this country. And probably like they don't really all, but it's meant to be, you know, the impact in the moment for this particular scene and the way that he remembers it kind of. But the blue eyes are kind of what comes back later and fucks him up. So one of these alchemists is out here causing all sorts of trouble. Scar is fighting these like various soldiers on the ground, and he is trying to find his own family and buy some time for his brother. These fucking soldiers go down like pins in front of a bowling ball. It is really remarkable how he tears through them. And he is looking around and finally manages to like find his own family and his brother. And his brother gives him the research and is like, look, you're a warrior and you've been trained, and I know that you are going to survive this. It's a lot more likely, at least, than that I will survive this. And what was so funny to me is that like his brother is completely fucking jacked. So he's got glasses, and I get that like this is supposed to make him like the nerdy brother, but it's just like a guy who's built like The Rock versus a guy who is built like, I don't know, name another fucking jacked movie star. But you know what I mean? Like, it's just him being like, you're a trained warrior. And I was like, okay, I believe that you're not because you're telling me you're not. But looking at you, you look like you could definitely be just fine. And then he's like, look at the way my legs are shaking. And I was like, okay, fair, but still, I just couldn't buy it. This dude, like his brother is fine as hell. You know, he's got a very sort of Havoc vibe to him, in my opinion. So this is when that state alchemist shows up, and it's the long-haired one with that smile that I'm pretty sure is the one that we saw in the prison. And they all realize who he is as he raises his hands because he's got the tattoos on the inside of his palms. And his brother is like, oh, okay, I know who he is. And he slaps his hands together and basically destroys the entire town with a big fucking smile on his face. And in this moment, his brother like steps in front of him. And it was sort of an interesting thing because I thought when we came back, it would be that his brother was dead and Scar is waking up and he is only alive because his brother put himself between him and the alchemist, and he's looking down at the sacrifice his brother made and is heartbroken over the fact that he doesn't have his brother anymore and he's still here, and there's guilt with that. And instead, he steps in front of Scar. But then we just get like the explosion, and when we come back to the scene, his brother seems like he's fine. And Scar is the one who's missing an arm here. And he is saying, I can't stop the bleeding. Where's my brother's arm? Which honestly, that moment with him just like looking for a random arm disembodied amongst the wreckage was really dark. I was just like, look, I'm sure if you were in the right facility and you could find his arm, you could figure some things out. And once we find out what he can do with alchemy, it's understandable. But for a moment, I was just like, is he just trying to put him back together like a toy, you know? And he's yelling for mother. Like, it's rough. And then he looks at his own hands and his own arms. And we see him begin to use some alchemy. And he says, don't die. I won't let you. And then we have Scar waking up with what looks like his brother's arm on his body. It's unclear. Like, is it his brother's actual arm? Did his brother manage to, like, make a new arm for him and it is his, like, the way that he gasps when he sees it makes me think it's a different arm and that he recognized it wasn't his own hand when he looks down. But it was done in such a way that I couldn't quite understand what was supposed to happen. And this moment with him waking up, he is... Okay, so people are saying it is his brother's arm. Okay. And I guess that his brother must have either died in the attempt or he is out there somewhere and he doesn't have an arm. I don't know, how this would work, but I'm going to assume he's dead until proven otherwise. He may still be alive. But Scar wakes up surrounded by other injured people, by doctors, and they are trying to evacuate if people are able to move because things are about to get really fucking heated here. And Winry's mom is talking to him and her bright blue eyes are like one of the first things he notices. Her and the other doctor as well, especially I think him because he's a guy and all the soldiers were men. So I think that feels more threatening. And he sees this dude and his like pupils dilate and he lifts his arm, realizes that it's his brother's arm. And he thinks for a moment that he is seeing his brother reaching out and that this is a signifier that his brother's alive, which for me is probably the worst part. The momentary hope of thinking he is going to be able to turn over and see him laying beside him or something. And then he realizes what it is and loses his mind. Because clearly what he thinks has happened is that they did some fucking shit to him and grafted his brother's arm onto him somehow. Like he doesn't realize that his brother is the one who sacrificed. He thinks they're experimenting and doing some fucked up shit on him, which honestly I get. Like I'm not even mad at him for thinking that. And he stands up with the memory of this state alchemist in his head. And he sees all of this like medical equipment around and leaps to this conclusion and then says, all of you will pay, and attacks. And we kind of cut back to him in the present, not seeing the attack. And it's interesting because he's thinking about this memory and remembering his brother's sacrifice in the memory. But it feels like he didn't know that's what happened at the time. And I'm wondering how he eventually either found out that his brother did it, or maybe he like one day, maybe, trauma can cause weird things to happen with your memory. And maybe he realized eventually a memory came back and all of a sudden he was like, oh my gosh, that's right. He was on the battlefield. He helped me, but it feels like in the way that this is being told, he knows that his brother did this for him. And yet in the moment at the doctor's, he thinks they did it to him. Brian says, I wonder if that is an intentional parallel. Scar's brother is an alchemist who gave up his arm to save his brother, and Ed did the same thing for Al. I was going to mention exactly, Ryan. Yeah. Alex says, it's not stated clearly, but I'm pretty sure Scar does realize his brother sacrificed himself to give Scar his arm. Oh, okay. He freaks out about his brother dying for him, and he sees the Emestrian doctors and wants revenge. Okay, so it's not that he thinks that they're doing an experiment on him. He just thinks this wouldn't have to be this way if you guys weren't fucking here. Which, again, I can't be mad at him for that at all. Like, look, this is something that I'm dealing with. I'm reading this other series. Kyle is the one, actually, Kyle's here in the chat, who commissioned it. And it's the Dandelion Dynasty series by Ken Liu. If you guys haven't read it, highly recommend it. It's really good. It's pretty bloody, though. And there is a thing with like a group being colonized at one point. And there are people amongst the colonizers who do not agree with what's happening and who were telling them like we shouldn't be treating them this way. But they are the minority who are being drowned out. And in the end, when some people rise up against their colonizers, the folks who like spoke out against it are mowed down, tortured, raped, killed just as much as any of the others are. And while a part of me is like, that's not fair, they didn't want this, another part of me is like, I can't be mad at somebody who has suffered that kind of atrocity, painting everybody with the same brush. I just can't make myself get upset about it. Like, I understand that it's not really just, but at the same time, you're entitled to your anger, man, over it. Like, I can't even blame you at all. So just looking at them and being like, y'all asses are the reason I am here with my brother's fucking arm. That is not the wrong reaction. I'm just saying. And he, in turn, Winry, there was a gun on the ground from one of the soldiers who was nearby who got blown up. She picks it up. And to his credit, Scar is just like, you do have the right to do this. I gotta admit, I did kill your parents. So, fair. But you should know it's probably not going to kill me. And it's going to be bad for you. And what we get is this kind of drawn out scene of Winry struggling to decide what to do. Because this dude killed her parents. Now he's in the street fighting Al and Ed. This guy destroyed the two of them already at one point, And he is actually encouraging her at one moment. He just says, like, go on, shoot. But know that the moment you pull the trigger, there's no going back. You will be my enemy. And the boys are just like, you aren't going to do shit to her. And he says, well, if you kill me, that's fine. But this chain of hatred is going to continue until one of us dies. And just a reminder, your fucking people are the ones who started this whole mess. So I'm just here doing what I gotta do because you guys did what you did. And I don't want this all resting on my shoulders because it's not just about me. And he then goes up to Winry and he extends his hand towards her to do some alchemy. And Ed gets between Scar and Winry, and all of a sudden, Scar remembers his brother throwing himself in front of Scar between him and the Alchemist. And it's just a really stark moment of Scar realizing that he is in the position of one of the greatest enemies that he's ever faced, doing like the same thing. And what's sort of weird is that Scar it's not like he has this like moment of real realization where he stops and goes, oh my God, I don't know what I've turned into. I can't understand how I got this twisted. It's not like there's this major dramatic come to Jesus reckoning. It's more like the memory kind of freaks him out enough that Al can step in. And even when he's like kind of in that moment, there's the voice of his master in his head being like, what you're doing is fucked up and it's not helping. It's not solving shit. All you're doing is keeping up with vengeance, and that's not going to do anything. You're just keeping this bullshit cycle going, so you're not helping anybody, and you're just drawing it all out and making it harder on yourself and everyone around you. So a part of me wants to believe that because that is playing in his head, that he is having a moment of just like, oh my God, you know? But the vibe that he has doesn't seem like a changed man. It doesn't seem like he takes it back and suddenly doesn't want to commit violence anymore. It just seems like he's shaken. And if anything, sometimes being shaken in that way can make you do the thing anyway, because you feel almost defiant about it. You know, you get angry in response. So he takes off. He like busts a hole in the wall and flees. He busts a hole in the wall behind a barrel that has a cat sitting on it. Just a funny detail that I noticed where the cat is just like, meow, as he like busts the wall and the cat goes flying and he just runs through the hole like it's fucking Looney Tunes. And I was just like, that's a weird touch, but why not? Okay, go ahead. Cat's fine. So Ed crouches down in front of Winry and is like, you gotta let go of the gun. And she says, I couldn't shoot. That man was threatening to kill you. He killed my mom and dad. He was going to kill Al. And I couldn't do it. What the fuck? And Ed says, remember in Rush Valley when you delivered that baby, you saved 2 lives. And you gave me an arm and a leg to replace the ones that I had lost. It's your hands. They weren't meant to kill. They are meant to give life. And I wanted a little bit more right here because I really like the overall vibe of this moment between the two of them. I really liked it. But I wanted him to take it that one step further and say, like your parents. Because that's the real clear parallel here. Her parents could have done the brutal thing and they didn't. Their instinct and urge was to help people. And it would be honoring them to like have mercy on somebody that really wants to do them harm. So I just wanted it to be a little bit more. Do you get what I mean? And it's not to say that it's a bad scene because I thought it was really, really well done. And she basically like completely breaks down at that point and throws herself into Ed's arms and just sobs in a way that I was like, the voice actress doing this was really, really convincing. But, yeah, this moment is just for like the realization of everything that everybody has gone through and the cycle. It is undeniable. Like, this is just such a true thing. And you don't know where to draw the line sometimes because everybody is very entitled to their anger. You know, even in this moment, Scar is like, she has the right to do this. They have every right and it's understandable. But if everybody takes advantage of that right, it never stops. So somebody, in order to stop it, has to forgive and step back. But who's going to do that? Like, genuinely asking, because I fucking wouldn't. Let me tell you guys, I hold a grudge. I just do. I don't want to be like that. It's not healthy. It's not helpful. But I know for good and goddamn well, sure, extending forgiveness to somebody who like killed my parents, no. Sure as fuck, not happening. Like, maybe I'm wrong and I would be so much more elevated, you know, I don't think so. Just not in the cards for me. Not it. So this is the thing about these cycles is like when people are in these sort of situations, it's truly makes sense how everyone is feeling. And there are going to be times where somebody feels like, oh, I'm just taking vengeance. And really it's like, well, no, the person you're allegedly taking vengeance on put themselves in a situation because they made some really fucked up choices and they decided that, you know, like there are people who get killed because they're out here starting shit on purpose. And that's, for me, a slightly different scenario. But what happened with Scar, what happens with Winry, I mean, that's just like, it's truly people who are like straight up victims. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They were not volunteering for these fucking situations. And it just sucks overall. Alex says that might have made her say, yeah, and look where that got them. Maybe she wouldn't say that, though. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's not really about whether or not that was good for them so much as you inherited a trait of theirs. And that's something of theirs that you have. And don't lose it. You know what I mean? It's like, it's like an object almost that she would be breaking if she pulled the trigger, kind of thing. But yeah, I don't know. I really liked that. And the episode ends there with her just like sobbing on the ground. And then it cuts to fucking like, ooh, guys, do you see this moth in here? I hate moths. Oh my God, I hate this. There's a bug on my mic. Oh, it's not even a moth. What is it? Ah! Ah! Oh, I hate bugs so much. I hate them. Why did I have to do that? I really got to close that window. Okay. Well, I'm at the end anyway, so I do need to wrap up, but that was a heavy ending for this episode. I think it's the episode after this one, the next one, 24, that has the like end credits or after credit scene. So just letting people know about that. If anybody's following along, I'm going to be trying to keep my eyes open for that. And I was watching this with Owen and doing my thing where I don't like look at the opening credits. And Owen had said something to me about how like, it's not that spoilery. And then he was sitting next to me and watching it. And all of a sudden he goes, oh, that's a giant fucking spoiler. Jesus, what the fuck? So apparently he did not remember a thing that is indeed in the opening credits and was like, yeah, do not watch those. All right. Well, I'm going to wrap, but thank you guys again for coming and hanging out with me. Thank you to Max very much for commissioning all of this. Appreciate you. And I will be seeing you guys again soon with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.